Well, I should say in the picture behind me, I do know that my husband is wearing a tuxedo t-shirt. We went to Zion National Park this summer, and he decided to be funny and wear that on the trail. We got many compliments and comments on that. But a little bit about me, I actually moved around a lot as a child. And when I say moved around, I mean we didn't just move and pick up and get another house or another city. We actually picked up and moved to another state every about 1.5 to 2 years. And by second grade, I had lived in 4 states, and we had just moved to our 5th, and that was Naperville, Illinois. And Naperville, Illinois is a great place to raise a family, very family-friendly place. And with every move, what was really important to me, and my mother, especially for me, was to make friends as soon as possible, to have friendships. Because as soon as I had a friend or a group of friends in a new place where we lived, it was like everything was going to be okay. It started to feel like home, you got in a groove, and everything was going to be great. Well, in Naperville, we were moving into our home and unpacking our boxes, and there was a knock on the door, and my mom went and answered the door, and there was this little girl, and she had bangs in her eyes and this big toothy smile. And she said to my mom, "I heard there's a girl here my age. Can she play?" And I came to the door, and I was just ecstatic. I got on my bike, and Mary Beth, her name, Mary Beth, we rode the neighborhood. She showed me around all afternoon until dinner time. And that's pretty much how my life looked like from then on out. Mary Beth and I were inseparable. We played every day. We were neighbors. We were in the same second grade classroom. She was my best friend. Well, about a year into our friendship, we decided to make it official, okay? And this is 1985. So in 1985, when you had a best friend, you went out and purchased the best friend's pendant. Who knows what I'm talking about, right? It was a heart or a circle, cracked apart, and one of you wore one half, one of you wore the other, and it was kind of a way to like stake your claim on your friend, right? Like, she's my best friend, I'm her best friend, the whole world knows now. So we went out and we purchased this necklace with our own money at Claire's boutique at the mall, and we were so proud to wear it. We never took them off. You know, we showered with them, we slept with them. They did not come off. Well, as much as I would like to think that getting that necklace and solidifying that friendship would mean we would be best friends for life, it didn't. Mary Beth and I were good friends. About a year later, I moved to Boston. I had to pick up and move again. Mary Beth and I did a wonderful job of keeping in touch. We wrote letters, we had phone calls. She even came to visit me in Boston. But as the years went on, as we got older and the teenage years hit, we eventually kind of faded out. Those moments were fewer and far between, and our friendship eventually faded. Until we were adults, we actually reconnected, and now we exchange Christmas cards every year. We've talked on the phone a few times. But if you were to ask Mary Beth, "Is Ashley still your best friend?" she'd probably say no. And if you ask me if Mary Beth is my best friend right now, I would say the same. You know, like that necklace that comes apart, we kind of went our separate ways. And friendship can be very strong. The bond of friendship can be very strong, but there's a bond that is stronger. And it was created to be that way, and that's the bond of marriage. Marriage was created to be the ultimate best friendship. And so today, we're going to be looking at how this relationship between husband and wife is the strongest of any relationship that we will have, and how we can keep it just a priority in our lives, how we can put it above all things. Well, first we need to look at, where did marriage come from, right? I mean, is it a social construct? Did we humans make it up to survive, right? Well, if we look to the Bible, we see that marriage is actually created by God. God, who created the universe and everything in it, also created marriage. He created the earth that we see, the animals that we see, every plant that we see. He created human beings in his image, and then he created marriage. In Genesis 2:24, referring to marriage, it says this: "Therefore a man shall leave his father and mother and hold fast to his wife, and they shall become one flesh." It talks about a man leaving his father and mother, and this also applies to women as well. In fact, we see this more in the marriage ceremony as it pertains to women. If you had a traditional marriage ceremony, or if you've ever witnessed one, you've seen the bride walk down the aisle, usually escorted by her father or some other male figure in her life. And when they get to the end of the aisle, the officiant oftentimes will ask, who gives this woman away in marriage? And then that person will respond, her mother and I do, or I do. And then she takes a few steps up next to her soon-to-be husband. This is that symbolism of leaving your father and mother and now holding fast to that spouse. And that relationship, that marriage relationship, is now your top priority human relationship. It is the most important relationship that you have. So that's my first point, is prioritize your husband over other relationships. Prioritize your husband over other relationships. Well, what kind of relationships are we talking about? Well, first off, family, right? We leave our family behind, and our new family is our husband. Doesn't mean we never speak to our parents and siblings again, but it just means that our husband is now more important. That relationship is more important when compared to our family. We've heard the term mama's boy, right? A man who will run to his mom even after being married for advice, to just vent, just to go to mommy and see what she needs, right? Or see what she can give him when he needs something. But there's no term for women that do this, and I find that women actually are equally as guilty of this. We can be guilty of going to our moms and complaining even about our husbands, going for advice, taking advice from our mothers before going to our husbands, or even over the advice we get from our husbands. So this is something we need to examine in our lives if that's something we're doing. And I had a friend who learned this kind of the hard way, as far as, leaving her father and mother and holding fast to her husband in marriage. She told me the story of when she first got married. She came from a family that was extremely close. She had sisters and a mother that they were just so tight-knit, and they loved doing things together. And their favorite time of year was Christmas. It was like their Super Bowl, because they had all these amazing traditions that they loved to do together. And so when she got married, she just kind of dragged her husband along and said, come on, we're going to mom's house. And they did all her traditions. And for her, everything was right in the world. I mean, she had this wonderful family, and she now had her husband, and all was good. Well, then they had a couple kids, and her husband looked at her one year during Christmas time and said, this year, I would like to stay home and start our own traditions for Christmas and not go to your mom's. And my friend was very taken aback, because this was very important to her. She loved this. This is all she knew, and she just was not ready to give it up. But she did that year. She yielded to her husband's request, and they stayed home, and they started their own family Christmas traditions. And looking back on it, she says it was the most valuable lesson, because she realized that Christmas that she had never truly left her family. She had kept one foot in the family category and the other in the marriage category. And that year, that veil was lifted, and she was able to kind of take that final step. So she was grateful for that happening. Well, the other group of friends we need to look at, or the other group is our friends. We need to look at the group we call our friends. We come into a marriage with friendships, some of us with big groups of friends, some with just a best friend. But like our family, our husband is now our best friend. Our husband needs to come above our friendships. And a good litmus test for this is to look at your schedule, look at the time that you spend, and how many girls' nights, girls' weekends, coffee dates do you have with your girlfriends, and contrast that with your date nights or date days with your husbands. Which one is heavier? And that's how you can kind of gauge where you're at with this, if you know where I'm going, right? Well, friendships are great. The Bible actually speaks at length about friendships and what a blessing they are and how we truly need them in our lives. But it also talks about the kind of friends we should have. We should be choosing friends that are going to be encouraging for our marriage. We should be choosing friends that are going to help us as a wife to be a good wife, to be our husband's best friend. When we hit those hard times in our marriage, and inevitably there will be hard times, you're going to want the type of friends that says, stick with it, keep doing the right thing, keep doing the good thing for your marriage, keep doing what is right. And you want to steer clear of a friend that might say, you deserve better, or go find your soulmate. And we hear that all too often, right? And women, when they get together, sometimes it can become commonplace. You get a group of married women together, and all it takes is one gal to throw out something about her husband, like, he leaves his socks on the floor all the time, And then another one might chime in, and, well, mine can't pick up his underwear and put it in the hamper to save his life. And then someone else, might chime in. And then all of a sudden you get all these stories terrible stories really, about everyone's husbands. And it's called husband bashing, really. And these husbands aren't there to defend themselves. That they don't even know they're being talked about this way. And really, are we really edifying our marriages by talking this way with friends? I mean, does it really make us look good? No. Think of it like your Facebook feed. If you were to scroll, right, would you post that your husband doesn't pick up his socks? We post the highlight reel, right? And that's how it should be when we're with our girlfriends. We should be talking about the great things our husbands do, because no matter what kind of marriage you're in, there is good to always point out and see. Well, the last category of people we need to look at, and this is the hardest one, is our kids. Yes. We need to prioritize our marriage over our children. And this can be really a difficult one to swallow because kids are so needy, right? They come out of us and they truly depend on us for survival. So how can we put our husbands before our children? But it can be done, and it should be done, because when God created human beings, he didn't create Eve and then her baby. He created Adam and Eve, the first marriage, and then they had children. There's an order to things. And this is the order, is that marriage is a priority over the children. And, the reason for this, too, is that the relationships are totally different. When you married your husband, you said vows to your husband. You said something along the lines of, till death do us part. Till death do us part. I don't know about you, but when I had my 3 children in the living room, the OBGYN did not lift them up and say, time to say vows to your child. He's here, right? We don't say vows to our children. And the reason is that our relationship with our children is temporary when we contrast it with the relationship to our husband. That relationship, the marriage relationship, to be the one we invest the most in, because it is the longest one. Because the reality is our children are going to be up and leaving the home one day, Lord willing, when they're 18, 20 years old, and they're going to be having their own families. And so that relationship doesn't die, but it does change drastically. I'm sure some of the mentors will tell you, once their children leave the home, that parent-child relationship changes, but the marriage relationship does not change. So that needs to be the one that we invest the most in. And we hear things like, from celebrities and people in the public, you'll hear phrases like, I put my kids first, or my kids are my life. And we might glaze over those and think nothing of it, and they sound noble, really, upon first hearing them. I put my kids first, they're my life. And I have no doubt that anyone that says that doesn't love their kids, doesn't love their children. I'm sure they do. But if they're married, I do wonder at the state of their marriage relationship. Because I thought about it. I have 3 kids. There's an 8-year age range, and I did some math, which I'm not great at, but homeschooling is helping that this year. Did some math, and I thought, okay, if I put my kids first, if I made them my life the entire time they're in my home, and they all leave the home at 18, Lord willing, by the time the last one leaves, I will have prioritized them for 26 years. 26 years. So I would have put my husband to the back burner for 26 years, poured into my children. When that last one leaves, I ask you, what would the state of my marriage be in? Do you think my husband and I would be very close? Most likely not. Almost 100% not. We need to put our husbands over our children. And you may be thinking, if this is the first time you've heard this, well, what about my kids? They're going to feel kind of, second best. It's going to hurt their self-esteem. It's going to maybe crush their spirit. But nothing could be further from the truth. It's actually so, so good for kids to see mom and dad putting that marriage relationship first. Whether they know it or not, it's kind of a subconscious thing. It gives them this sense of security. It gives them a sense of comfort. This wall of protection goes up around them that will benefit them in all facets of life. Seeing this is the best thing that they can possibly see. Well, how can we do it practically? I'm going to give you a few examples. There's many, but a couple of these you could start as early as tonight. So the first thing to show your kids that your husband is the priority relationship is to not let them interrupt if you're talking to your husband. If you are having a conversation with your husband, they should not be allowed to interrupt. And this should go across the board when you're speaking to any adult, but especially your husband. Because if you're speaking with your husband, and let's say your little one comes up and says, "Mommy, mommy, mommy," and you stop the conversation and you look down at your child and said, "What would you like?" You're telling your child, "You, sweetie, are more important than daddy." And you're telling your husband, "This child is more important than you." You're not saying those words, but that's what you're saying through your actions. So don't let your children interrupt a conversation. That's just a small way that we can start implementing this. Second thing is put your kids to bed early. Put them to bed at a reasonable hour. And many of you probably already do this because kids need sleep, right? They need that 10 to 12 hours. But the other reason we should do this is we should have time with our husbands after the children go to bed. That is precious time we can get almost every night if both of you are home. And it's important to get the kids down and that they even know, hey, mommy and daddy are going to have mommy and daddy time. That's okay if they know that after they go to bed, you guys are going to have some mommy and daddy time. And they need to stay in bed and go to sleep. Simple. Well, the last way is to go on dates with your husband. And we'll talk a little more about dating a little later. But getting out with your husband without children, if children are coming with you, it's not a date, just so you know. It's a totally different definition. That's family night. Getting out with your husband without kids is so important. Well, we talked about putting our husband over other relationships. But how else can we prioritize this human relationship that we have? Well, we can do it with our time. And so that's my second point. Prioritize your time for your husband. Prioritize your time for your husband. Well, let me ask you, what would happen if I had a friend and I wanted to hang out with her? I said, hey, let's go grab lunch sometime. And she said to me, I'm so busy. I'm just so busy right now. Maybe in a couple weeks, And then I check back in a couple weeks and, hey, let's try to get that coffee date or whatever. Oh, I'm just so still bogged down and I really want to hang out. I do. I have all these other things going on right now. And let's say this goes on for months and months and maybe even we get to a year, right? And we still haven't hung out. I mean, by this time, this friend and I don't really have much of a friendship left, right? I have no idea what's going on in her life if it weren't for Facebook or something, right? I would have no clue about her. And so our friendship would inevitably fade. Sometimes we can take for granted the time we have with our husbands and the time we need to give our husbands. We may fall into the trap of thinking that, well, I live with him. We share a home, we share a bed, we share meals together. I'm checking the spending time boxes. But I'm sure if you ask your mentor moms at your tables today, if that is enough, they're all going to shake their heads no. We need to be really intentional about giving time to our husbands, spending time with our husbands. Because truly, roommates live in the same home. Roommates share meals together. That's not a marriage. A marriage is something so much more. So we need to be really intentional about it. And I know that we're really busy. I know that our days are full. Some of you may work outside the home, but even if you are at home, I know I am a stay-at-home mom. My days are packed. You could go 24 hours a day, truly, if you were allowed to, or if you could stand it, right? But we need to carve out these pockets of time for our husbands. We need to be intentional about it, and it's going to be some work. It's going to take some work. It's not going to be easy. It's not going to be something that comes naturally. But if you care about your marriage, and if you want it to last till death do us part, this is something that we really need to prioritize. So I know the hours of 4 to 8 p.m. can be a little hectic for most homes, right? Those are the hours where the kids are getting a little, rowdy, cranky towards the end of the day. You've got dinner that has to be made. The house may be a little disheveled from the day, and it just can be a stressful time. And then to add it, most husbands come home from work during those hours, right? Between 4 and 8 p.m. So how can we manage this part of the day better so that when our husbands walk in the door, it's not complete chaos. It's not a negative atmosphere to walk into, but it's something welcoming, something full of joy, and something that, just welcomes him into the home at the end of a long day. We can anticipate this time and just plan ahead for it. We can find pockets of time by being better planners. So if you are in the home all day and you have things to do, I'm a big to-do list person. Make that to-do list. Check off the things you need to do, get them done in a timely manner. If the house during those hours of the day becomes disheveled, enlist your kids to clean up, right? They've probably made 99% of the mess anyway. So it's cleanup time, guys. Dad's going to be home in an hour. Let's go. Pick up your toys. Okay, you sweep the floor. You straighten the couch. Give them things to do. And I assure you, within 10 minutes, you can have the house not looking like a museum, but it will be presentable to someone that would walk in the door. And then also, try to meal plan. We had Kelly here a few weeks ago. She did a fabulous job talking about meal planning. I mean, if you have a plan of what you're going to be eating that night and maybe even done some prep work before, you have bought yourself some time. You have bought yourself a pocket of time that you didn't have before that you can then give to your husband. So when he comes in the door, give him a big kiss. Welcome him in. Stop whatever you're doing and go over to him. Have your kids do the same. Put down whatever toy they're playing with or whatever show they may be watching and give daddy a hug. I assure you, this is going to go a long way. I even have a friend who's a male who told me that when he would come home, his wife would greet him with joy, but also, tell him something positive from the day, something that happened that was positive. And he said, whatever he had been feeling before walking through that door was just kind of dissipated. It was, it just went away because he came home to this joyful home and a place where he felt welcomed and loved. So this can go a long way with our husbands. Well, a good friend of mine told me about another little tactic we can use, and you could implement it, again, as soon as tonight. It's called couch time. And couch time, as she describes it, is just giving your husband 5 minutes when he gets home to kind of reconnect. So what it looks like is that he gets home and changes clothes or whatever he needs to do to kind of settle in physically into the home, and then you two sit on the couch together, uninterrupted. This is a time when kids have to go do something else and give mommy and daddy 5 minutes. And then this is your time to just reconnect with your husband because he's been at work all day and you've either been in the home all day or maybe you work, but either way, your paths have been going like this all day and they haven't crossed. So this is the time to just bring them together and get on that same page when he comes home. 5 minutes, guys, 5 minutes. You could find that time for sure. But I always love that piece of advice. And I don't think we can talk about investing time into our marriages without talking about dating our husbands, right? When you were, before you were married, you probably dated your husband, right? You guys went on lots of fun dates. You spent all kinds of time together. It was fun. It was interesting. And then maybe even after being married, you probably did it often as well. And then you have children, and sometimes that can drop off a bit, right? It can be harder to find that time to get out together. But really, once the children come, it becomes even more important to make time for that in your marriage. Extremely important. Dating is a way that you're going to grow with your spouse, okay? You're going to get out of the house. You're going to talk about things that you don't get to talk about at home. Try not to talk about the kids on a date night. Talk about other things. It's a time when you're going to grow together and come together again and really strengthen your marriage. And when you're on a date, again, try not to talk about the kids or maybe even work, but talk about other things. Maybe talk about memories that you have together, right? About when you were dating or things you did way back when. Sometimes brand new things can come out when you're on a date about your husband that you never knew. This has happened to me countless times, and I've known my husband, been with my husband for 22 years. And every now and then, he'll tell a story about his childhood or something, and I'm like, what? I've never heard that. How did I not know that about you? And it's kind of cool because it brings back that newness. It brings back that little spark you had in the beginning when everything they told you was new, right? Everything about them was brand new. It was just mind-blowing. So those are the types of things that'll come out on a date night that most likely won't, in the home or in passing as you guys are doing life together at home. And also just take that time to daydream. Even if you're in your 20s, talk about what you want to do after retirement. Talk about what you want to do when the kids are gone. Even if you're holding an infant in your arms, start to daydream with him. This is fun. This is something that's going to kind of bring you guys together. Like they mentioned in my intro, my husband and I love to sail, and that's what we do for 20 plus years. We've talked about how we want to sail around the world. And this topic will come up on date nights often, and we've talked about it I don't know how many times, and we just love talking about it. We love talking about whether we would sail a monohull or a catamaran or, where we want to spend the most time and which route we'd take. We sit there and we daydream together, and it is so much fun. And we may never sail around the world, but I can say that we've had a blast talking about it for 20 years. Well, a lot of people find that getting out is hard because of the babysitting dilemma, right? We have to have somebody watch our children. And if you don't have family around, that can be difficult. I can completely empathize. But again, going back to that, this takes intention and work. We're going to have to put that work into it. You're going to have to find somebody to watch your kids. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a babysitter that you pay. I have been in Navigating Motherhood for 10 years. I have seen tables where they all exchange their kids and do like a little co-op, right? I'm gonna watch your kids Friday, you watch mine next Friday. There are neighbors. I know in our old neighborhood, we had an elderly neighbor who just loved kids, and she literally offered herself to us. She said, I just love kids, can I watch your kids? There are so many options out there. So don't let babysitting be the deterrent to getting out and investing in your marriage by dating your husband. Well, I hope you guys can each set a goal in this area today. If you are currently dating your husband, awesome, A+. But if that seems to have, dropped off the priority list in the last months or years, please make it a goal today to set a goal with your husbands, maybe once a month, even once every other month if you want to start really small. But make a goal and make this a priority. Well, when you were dating your husband, before you were married, I'm sure that if he asked you to do almost anything, you'd probably do it within reason, right? I mean, if your husband said to you, honey, I want eggs over easy in the shape of a Lamborghini, you would find that Lamborghini mold, wouldn't you? You'd search Amazon, you'd find it, and you would make those eggs in the shape of a Lamborghini. You'd go the extra mile. But somehow, once we're married for a while, sometimes that zeal for tending to his needs or his desires can somewhat fade off. We see maybe other people's needs, like our kids, or maybe even our own needs, as more important. But we cannot lose sight of what our husband needs and desires. So that's point number 3. Prioritize his needs and desires. Well, you're not going to know what his needs or desires are unless you ask him. So this is a great topic for date night. See how this is all linking together? So when you're on a date night, ask your husband flat out, what do you need from me? What do you need from me this week? What do you need from me today? What do you need around the house done? What do you desire? What do you want more of? What do you want less of? Find out what he prefers. Find out what his needs and desires are. Maybe it's around the house, right? We're all keeping our homes, and maybe he doesn't want a museum clean house, but there's a few kind of hot button spots that if they're out of order, that's what kind of, maybe sets him off. Tend to those spots. Make that a priority. I know for our household, believe it or not, it's the junk drawer. I mean, that should be my sanctuary of disorganization in the home, just in the title alone, right? But my husband, for whatever reason, doesn't like a disorganized junk drawer. And so we have the dividers, and eventually it gets really messy, but when it gets to a point, I pull it out, and I take everything out, and I clean it out, and boy, when he opens it, he's so happy. It's a junk drawer, guys. It's a junk drawer, and it took me 5 minutes, right? A little thing like that. So find his little hot buttons and tend to those. Make them a priority. Well, we can't talk about desires within marriage, I think, without talking about intimacy in marriage, because intimacy in marriage is so important. It is really the glue that holds marriage together. When God spoke of marriage in Genesis and he says the two became one flesh, that's what he was speaking of, was that physical joining that we have in marriage. It should be one of our highest priorities, and we know it's a priority for our husbands. Most husbands, this is like in their top 5 or top 2, right? So if it's a priority for them, it needs to be a priority for us. And like other things, maybe you've had a baby recently, you're not feeling as attractive. I know we're all really tired with kids and all that we do for that, and it's so easy to make excuses. And our culture is really good at fueling this. If you watch TV and movies, you'll see wives constantly pushing their husbands away, and I have a headache and all this stuff, and you'll hear the laugh track go over of everyone laughing at it. But when you really look at that and think about it, we're laughing at somebody chipping away at the glue of a marriage. I mean, this is actually not a laughing matter. We need to prioritize this in our marriage over our feelings, however we feel about it. And we do this in so many other areas of our life, probably without realizing it. And I'll name one that I know everyone can probably relate to. If you have an infant or have had an infant, which if you're here at Navigating Motherhood, I'm assuming you have, those first few months, right, you're getting up 2, 3, 4 times a night to feed. Every 2 hours they need to eat, every 3 hours they need to eat, right? So let's say it's the third time the baby cries in the middle of the night. How many of you just jump out of bed like, yes, I'm ready to do it again. I can't wait to breastfeed again. No, you roll out of bed. You would much rather sleep. You don't feel like getting out of bed. You don't feel like it at all. But you do it, right? You do it because because your children need you. Your child needs you. He needs you to feed him. He needs you to change him, whatever it may be. And it's the same with our husbands. Our husbands need us in this way. So we need to make it a priority because we're going to be held accountable by God for this, really. Sex is very important to God within marriage, and he's going to hold us accountable to how we lived up to our role as wives in general, and in this area especially. It's extremely important to him. Well, how do we do this practically? I would say just start thinking about it more. Women are big head cases in this area, so thinking about it more, believe it or not, it will start to spur on other things, I will guarantee you. And then, communicate that to your husband. Maybe send him a flirty little text, let him know, hey, come home early this evening, or I'm going to put the kids to bed early this evening, little hint, things like that. I mean, really try to initiate this in your marriage. Husbands love that. Well, one area that if you were to ask your husband what he needs or desires, he may not voice this, but it's something that's so important to men, and especially husbands, is he needs you to be his biggest encourager. Men need to be encouraged in the roles that they have in their life. Men need to know that you appreciate them, that they are needed. They need to know that they are respected in their home. They need to know that you're in their corner and that you support them, that you're their biggest cheerleader. This is huge for men. And again, they may not know they need it, but they really, really need it. It's so important. Encourage him in all the roles that he has. Try to encourage your husband verbally. I mean, you may think it in your head, but he's not hearing that. We need to verbalize it to our husbands. Honey, I love it when you do this. It's so romantic. It makes me feel so loved. Encourage him as a husband. Encourage him as a father. Honey, I watched you wrestle with the boys, and it was so endearing to see you just being such a great dad. He's going to be encouraged by that. Encourage him in his work, whatever it may be, whatever job he's doing. Let him know that you think he's doing a good job and that you're thankful for the provision that he gives your family. Men, really, it just goes a long way with men. And honestly, what's going to happen is they're going to be encouraged to do it more. They're going to actually continue that behavior, and that behavior will increase, which is great for everybody, which is great for the family. And that shouldn't be our motivation to get more. That would be manipulation. But our motivation should be to encourage our husband. What's going to happen, though, is this natural byproduct is going to be that they will do it more, which is going to benefit everybody. Well, some of you today in the room may not be married, and that's totally okay. And I hope that today you gleaned something that you could maybe take into a future marriage or even share with a friend who's married. And some of you today may be in difficult marriages, and you may have heard some of these things and think, I can't do this. My husband does not deserve this, and this is impossible. Well, I'm just going to tell you from personal experience just to do it anyway. Do it anyway. Because we're wives and we're called to be good wives. We're called to be our husband's best friend in this life. Prioritize your husband over other people. Prioritize your time for your husband and prioritize his needs and desires. I guarantee you this investment will not come back void. It will not come back void. I was thinking about the best friend's necklace, and we wore it nonstop. And I started to think, when did I take it off? And I can't remember. I can't remember when I took that best friend's necklace off. For the life of me. But when I think about my engagement, my wedding ring, I could tell you the exact date I got these. I could tell you what I'm wearing. I could tell you what the weather was like. I could tell you who was there. I could tell you every detail about these rings and when I received them, because this relationship is the most important. So let's start to live like it is, and let's be our husband's best friend. So thank you for listening today, and have a wonderful discussion time.